You tear it with your hands. You smell it before you taste it. You eat it toasted, sliced, fresh from the oven, or straight from a plastic bag in your kitchen. Bread. You have eaten it thousands of times. Maybe 10,000 times. You know exactly how it feels in your mouth, how it fills your stomach, how it comforts something you cannot name. But here is what you do not know. This food did not exist for 99.9% of human history. For almost 300,000 years, your ancestors lived without it. They hunted animals. They gathered plants. They ate what they found. They never baked. They never fermented. They never transformed raw ingredients into something entirely new. Then, roughly 14,000 years ago, something changed. In a small settlement near the Jordan River, a person whose name we will never know did something unprecedented. They collected wild wheat. They ground it between stones. They mixed it with water. They placed it on hot stones beside a fire. The result was flat, crispy, smoky. It was not bread as you know it, but it was the beginning. And that beginning would reshape your brain, your body, and your entire species. Everyone knows that bread is old. You learned this in school. The ancient Egyptians baked it. The Romans distributed it to crowds. For most of history, bread meant survival. But something about this story does not add up. Think about it. Humans had fire for at least 400,000 years. They had stones for grinding. They had access to wild grains for millions of years. So why did bread appear so late? Why not 50,000 years earlier? Why not 100,000 years earlier? The tools were there. The ingredients were there. The intelligence was there. What was missing? This question haunted archaeologists for decades. They found stone tools. They found hearths. They found evidence of plant eating going back deep into prehistory. But the oldest bread crumbs remained stubbornly recent. 14,000 years sounds ancient to you. In evolutionary time, it is yesterday. Something else must have been necessary. Something beyond tools and ingredients. Something inside the human mind itself. In 2018, a team led by Dr. Amaya Aranzo-Tigi from the University of Copenhagen changed everything we thought we knew. They were excavating a site in northeastern Jordan called Shabaka 1. This was a settlement built by the Natufian people, hunter-gatherers who lived in this region between 14,000 and 11,000 years ago. The Natufians were not farmers. They did not plant crops. They moved seasonally, following food sources, living in small groups. Dr. Aranzo-Tigi was not looking for bread. She was analyzing food residues from stone cooking installations. Her team used scanning electron microscopy to examine tiny particles stuck to ancient stone tools. What they found made no sense at first. Starch granules. Thousands of them. Damaged in a specific way. The damage patterns showed they had been ground, mixed with water, and heated. This was not accidental. This was not porridge. The microscopic structure matched modern bread more than any other food preparation. The date was staggering. 14,000 years ago. 5,000 years before agriculture began. 4,000 years before the first domesticated wheat. These people were making bread from wild plants. They were investing enormous energy, collecting, grinding, mixing, baking, for a food they could have eaten raw. The wild grains were edible without processing. Other animals ate them directly. The Natufians chose complexity over simplicity. They chose transformation over consumption. Why? The answer required going deeper. In 2020, Dr. Tobias Richter, also from the University of Copenhagen, published a follow-up study in the journal Nature Plants. He had been analyzing the same site, but looking at different evidence. Richter noticed something strange about the architecture. The bread-making area was not hidden. It was central. It was large. It could have produced food for far more people than lived in this small settlement. This was not private cooking. This was public production. Bread was being made in quantities that exceeded immediate need. It was being shared. It was becoming social. Richter proposed a radical idea. Bread was not invented for nutrition. The caloric return was terrible compared to the labor invested. Wild grains are small. They are hard to collect. Grinding them destroys tooth enamel. The energy payoff was minimal. Bread was invented for something else entirely. It was invented for gathering. Here is where the story takes its strangest turn. In 2021, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania, led by Dr. Katerina Harvati, published a study in the journal Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. They were not studying bread. They were studying human brain evolution. Their team had been comparing brain sizes across human history. They noticed something that had been hiding in plain sight. Human brains had been shrinking for the past 20,000 years. Not dramatically, but consistently. Your brain is smaller than the brain of a human from 30,000 years ago. This seems like bad news. Smaller brains sound like reduced intelligence. But Harvati's team proposed the opposite explanation. Brains were shrinking because they were becoming more efficient. They were specializing. They were outsourcing certain functions to the social environment. And the timing was precise. The shrinkage began around the same time as bread, around the same time as permanent settlements, around the same time as increasingly complex social organization. Bread did not just feed bodies. It fed a new kind of mind, a mind that could trust others to remember things, a mind that could coordinate labor, a mind that could gather in groups larger than any primate group before. But this was only half the story. The most surprising discovery came later. In 2022, a team at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences, led by Dr. Katharina Whitfeld, published research in the journal Brain Structure and Function. They were studying modern humans who had never eaten bread. Not because of choice, because of biology. Whitfeld's team found individuals with rare genetic variations affecting how they process gluten. These people experienced bread differently, not just in their guts, in their brains. Their dopamine responses to starchy foods were measurably different. Their reward prediction systems fired on different patterns. This was the key. Bread contains compounds that trigger dopamine release more reliably than almost any natural food. The starches break down into sugars. The sugars hit the bloodstream quickly. The brain learns to anticipate this. The brain learns to crave it. You have felt this. The smell of baking bread in a store. The warmth of it in your hands. The particular satisfaction that seems deeper than simple hunger. This is not accidental. This is engineering. Ancient engineering. The Natufians did not know about dopamine. They did not know about neurotransmitters. But they knew something was happening when they gathered around the bread. Something that made people stay. Something that made people return. Something that made cooperation feel good. You thought bread was invented because people were hungry. You thought it was simple survival. But the real reason was stranger. The real reason was buried in your brain chemistry, in social dynamics older than language, in the peculiar human need to transform raw nature into shared meaning. The Natufians invented bread because they were becoming something new. They were becoming people who gathered, people who delayed gratification, people who invested labor now for rewards later, people who could trust strangers because of shared ritual. Bread was a technology of social bonding. Every loaf required cooperation. Someone gathered grain. Someone ground flour. Someone tended fire. Someone watched children while others worked. The division of labor emerged from this simple act. And once this pattern existed, it spread. The archaeological record shows bread-making technology appearing across the Middle East within a few thousand years. Not because people were copying recipes, because they were copying social structures. They were copying ways of being together. This changes how we see ourselves. You are not a solitary survivor. You are a descendant of people who invented gathering. Your brain was literally shaped by bread. The dopamine systems that drive your cravings were calibrated by 10,000 years of starchy rewards. The social instincts that let you trust coworkers, neighbors, strangers on the street, they were built in gatherings around shared food. The modern world confuses this. You eat alone. You eat quickly. You eat processed versions of ancient foods that bypass the labor and the gathering entirely. Your brain receives the chemical signals without the social context. The dopamine fires without the cooperation. The craving persists without the community. This is the evolutionary mismatch. Your brain expects bread to mean gathering. Your brain expects the reward to follow the ritual. When the ritual disappears, the reward feels hollow. You eat more seeking something that cannot be found in food alone. But understanding this changes something. The next time you smell bread, you can recognize what is happening. The ancient survival switch is firing. It is telling you that gathering is possible. That cooperation is possible. That transformation of grain, of self, of society is possible. You began this video tearing bread with your hands. You end it understanding that this simple act connects you to 14,000 years of human invention. The person in Jordan who first placed ground grain on hot stone did not know they were changing the future. They were solving an immediate problem. How to gather people. How to create surplus. How to make temporary settlement feel like home. Their solution became your inheritance. your cravings, your social instincts, your capacity for cooperation and trust. All of it was shaped by this ancient invention. Maybe the problem was never weakness. Maybe your cravings are not failures of willpower. Maybe they are signals from deep time, reminders of what gathering meant, of what transformation required, of what your ancestors built together around simple fires. The bread is still warm. The gathering is still possible. The invention continues.